Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Today I want to share with you the books that I read during the month of January. I will start by discussing 3 books that I will or already have discussed in longer length in a separate video. First up we have the 2 last installments in the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I have finished now these 2 last books of the series, and I will record a specific video reviewing the whole series, talking about the themes that they tackle and the things that I noticed about the series reading these books as an adult. This video will probably come out sometime during this end of this month or next month, as I am still currently watching the Netflix series adaptation, and I also want to compare that to the books. So stay tuned for more about the series of Unfortunate Events. Next up, I also have to mention Agatha Christie's Autobiography. I really enjoyed this book, in which she gives her own account of her life and her growing up and starting to write. It was written in a very conversational tone that I really enjoyed, and I felt like I could learn more about her as a writer and also as a person. And I have discussed this book in a separate review, which I will link up here, and you will get it also down below. Now on to the 3 other books that I read, and I must say that the month of January was a really good reading month. I had 1 5-star read, 2 4.5-star reads, and almost no book that I loathed. So I'm gonna talk first about my 5-star read, and that is that little novella by John Steinbeck called The Peril. In The Peril, we follow a family of indigenous people of Mexico, and they live in a very poor town that nowadays is La Paz. But in that time, in the probably around the 1940s, was quite a small town, and they are a family of fishermen. And one day the father of the family, Kino, discovers a huge pearl, and that kind of sets off all kinds of things happening, as this pearl represents a huge promise for the family because they're very poor, and the greed and envy of the people around them make the whole situation turn very sour. I'm not going to say much more about it because it's so short and it would be a pity to spoil it for you. I have previously read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and it's one of my favorite books. I really enjoy his writing, and I think it's always really evocative. There's a lot of description of the places that the book is set in, a lot of landscapes, a lot of feeling of place and people. One thing that I really enjoy, and you might enjoy it as well if you like music in books, is that there is this thread going through the book of moments and instants being put together with a song. There's no lyrics as such of the song, but the songs kind of describe the mood of a scene. You have the song of family, which is moments where the family of fishermen feels very peaceful and all is well in the world, but then there's also some more dramatic moments, and there's this feeling that there's this music all around the people. And I really love that. I had never seen it done in that way before, and that's something that I enjoy in general when moments are put together with music, so I highly enjoyed this. Another thing that was really impressive to me is how the tension build-up was. It was so strong and at the same time very well paced and really gripping until the end. In essence, this book is almost folklore put together with cautionary tale, because in the end it's also a very realistic depiction of how greed and poverty and racism can lead down a very dark path to loss and despair. And I absolutely loved this novella. The next book I finished, I read in audiobook form, and it is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Gottlieb. This is a memoir slash nonfiction of Lori Gottlieb, who is a psychotherapist, and she takes us along in her world and in her job, how she interacts with her patients, how she can help them in some ways and not in some other ways. And at the same time, we also see the other side of things as we follow her going through her own therapy when she goes through a really bad breakup and has problems getting to terms with it. What I really enjoyed about this book was that it really demystifies therapy. Gottlieb takes us along to some therapy sessions she has with her own patients, and it is based on some patients that she did indeed have. There's just some facts that are changed to keep the privacy of these patients. But it all feels very real. What I also really enjoyed was how conversational the tone of the book was. There's a lot of compassion and at the same time analysis of what makes us human and our nature. I also really enjoyed that you get to see both sides, both the therapist's side and the patient's side, through the same person. And we also got to go together with her on her journey to understanding herself, what her problems are. And you really get to it bits by bits, as you would if undertaking therapy sessions. The only thing that I have to mention about this book that you should maybe be aware of is that the author never really talks about how therapy is not always accessible to everyone, and how in some countries like the US, in which she is located, people cannot always afford to get professional help. So that's just one thing that I guess I wished would be more discussed, and it is not. Nevertheless, the book was very enjoyable, and what I loved the most about it was how demystifying it was and how much I got to learn about the human condition and things that we encounter, all of us, problems that we all have that are just part of our nature. Finally, I want to talk about the last book that I finished in January, and that was The Midwich, Cuckoos by John Wyndham. This is a 1950s sci-fi book, I guess, with some horror elements. The book is set in a small English town called Midwich, and one day everyone falls unconscious, and upon waking up, the inhabitants feel like nothing has changed except that all the women in childbearing age are pregnant. After a very fast pregnancy, the children are born, and it's clear very fast that they are not quite like their peers. I'm not going to say too much more about the plot because it would be such a shame to spoil it. But I'm going to talk about some things that I really enjoyed about this book. This book is, or felt to me like a somewhat an extension or a deepening of some discussions that were made in H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, which I absolutely loved. And that already gave the book a lot of plus points. It's funny because The War of the Worlds is even mentioned by name in the book, and there is some discussions by the characters as how their situation is very near to the situation that is depicted in Wells's book, which was very meta and funny to me. It's definitely a slow book. There's not much action-packed things going on, but the tension and the building up of that tension is very much there, and it's what really makes the book gripping. The end was like such a punch, and I absolutely loved it, and it made the whole experience so worth it. One thing that I wished was explored a bit more was to maybe discuss the place of the women in this book who are getting essentially pregnant against their will, and how they deal with the situation and having these children that they don't feel like are really their children at all. But then you have to keep in mind that it's a book from the 1950s, and that's maybe something that especially a man at that time would not necessarily write about in such depth. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. If you like sci-fi and if you like what I call old school sci-fi, things like the works of H.G. Wells, you will really love this book. It's essentially a discussion of what do we do as a human species if we are threatened, if our survival is threatened. And it's all the questions of, can we do something as individuals? Do we just do business as usual and try to keep things down? Do we try to get the authorities to do something, or do we try to shush it just by shame? And it's very much worth a read. Alright guys, these were the books that I finished in January. Let me know down below, have you read any of these? Do you want to read any of these? If you do, let me know down below, because I would be very happy about it. I got some very good reads this month and I hope I could spread my enthusiasm for them. Let me know what you have been reading this January. Did you also start your reading year well? And I'll see you in my next one. Bye!